The crate groaned as the last rope was cut, splintering with scraping against dusty floorboards. Elias's hands shook only slightly as he grabbed the lever to lift the lid, the scent of cedar and sweat thick in the noonday heat. A shadow moved inside, and the whole ranch seemed to pause, holding its breath. She stepped out like a mountain carving herself into the sun. Pale skin gleamed, her hair a silver cascade that caught every stray beam, her shoulders squared against the world. Her eyes, wide and wary, locked on Elias's hands holding the brace. "Wait!" Her voice trembled, but carried a command that belied her size. "You're placing that inside me?" Elias froze, realizing the misunderstanding. The brace was for her wrists. Metal, not weapon, not threat, but the look on her face froze him in place. Fear, sharp and raw, cut through the heat. Dust swirled around them, tiny motes dancing like frightened spirits in the afternoon sun. The horses stamped nervously, sensing the tension, and somewhere in the canyon, a hawk shrieked its lonely warning. The crate's ropes dangled, still swaying, as if the wood itself was holding its secrets tight. Her hands trembled, fingers brushing the smooth wood of the crate as if grounding herself to the only familiar thing. Elias's voice broke through low, steady. "Easy now. I'm just helping you stand." She flinched, then froze again, the metal brace trembling in his grip. Every movement seemed amplified. Her giant frame was both intimidating and delicate, a paradox carved into human form. Elias saw the scars, faint lines along her wrists and shoulders, each one a story of pain, of survival. The wind rattled the shutters, bringing the distant cries of the canyon. Wolves or coyotes, Elias couldn't tell. His eyes never left her face. There was a wariness there, not just fear of him, but of the world that had delivered her in a wooden cage. "Careful," she whispered, voice barely audible. "Don't." And then the crate shifted under a lingering foot, tilting slightly. Dust plumes rose in lazy clouds, and for a heartbeat, neither moved. Then Elias adjusted his hold, muscles straining, heart hammering against his ribs. Her gaze softened fractionally as she realized his hands were steady, patient, and not meant to harm. The horses snorted. The sun beat down, relentless and blinding, yet the shadow of the canyon wall wrapped around them like a cloak. She stepped fully free, towering over the crate, yet Elias noticed the tension in her knees, the way she balanced every ounce of her strength. And in that suspended moment, with the wind carrying the scent of earth and sweat and cedar, a truth became clear to him. She was not just a bride delivered in a crate. She was a force the world had not yet reckoned with, and Elias, quiet as he was, would need every ounce of caution and courage to meet her. The barn door slammed behind her, a clap of sound that rattled the rafters and sent a flock of sparrows screaming into the sky. Elias stepped back, heart pounding as she turned, eyes scanning the shadows, muscles coiled like a panther ready to strike. The wind carried the scent of the canyon, dry and sharp, and the faint metallic tang of the brace on her wrists. Who are they?" Elias asked, his voice low, almost swallowed by the creaking wood. Her gaze flicked past him, toward the distant ridge where dust curled like smoke. "The Iron Riders," she said, each word measured, clipped, her giant frame tense. "They'll take me back, make sure I serve where I'm told, where I'm owned." Elias swallowed, feeling the weight of the words settle over him like a storm cloud. He noticed the scars again, faint, jagged lines across her forearms, and something in his chest twisted. He'd seen pain before, but this was different, deep, calculated. Survival etched into every sinew. A horse snorted outside, stamping impatiently. The faint echo of metal against stone drifted from the canyon, like a warning whisper carried on the wind. She moved toward the water trough, lifting it with one arm as easily as a child would lift a bucket. Elias froze, realizing her strength wasn't just physical. It was trained, precise, honed in ways he couldn't yet understand. "Careful," he muttered, not sure if he was speaking to her or to the fate chasing them. Her eyes met his, a flash of something unspoken. She nodded once, a tiny acknowledgement, before turning to the barn wall and flexing her shoulders, preparing for what was coming. The sun glinted off her hair, silver against the dusty wood, and in that light, she looked less like a captive and more like a warrior waiting to awaken. The saloon bell jingled in town, carried faintly by the wind, and a few townsfolk paused mid-step, whispering, "That's her, the giant woman. They say she's from the north, a fighter." She flinched, almost imperceptibly, at the words, pressing a hand to her shoulder where the faded tattoo marked her history. A scar from a life she'd tried to outrun, etched in ink and blood. Elias noticed it, but he said nothing. Instead, he fetched another barrel of water, letting her handle it. Trust had to be earned here, step by careful step. A distant hoofbeat rattled the horizon. Fast, calculated, not the lazy stride of a traveler, but the warning of hunters closing in. Dust spiraled, and the sound grew sharper, closer, echoing across the canyon like a drumbeat in the belly of the earth. She froze, ears straining, body taut, ready. Elias reached out, his hand brushing hers as if to steady her. She didn't recoil, not this time. Instead, she let him guide her to the shadows, muscles rippling under her skin, every movement deliberate. "I won't run," she said quietly, eyes fixed on the horizon where the dust now rose in a wall, a promise of violence. "But I will fight, if they come." And in that instant, Elias understood. The woman in the crate wasn't just a survivor. She was a storm waiting to break, and the desert itself seemed to hold its breath, knowing something legendary was about to unfold. The night pressed in like a living thing, the wind slicing through the barn cracks with whispers of steel and dust. Elias crouched low, gun resting heavy in his hands, eyes fixed on the shadows where the riders' silhouettes cut jagged shapes against the moonlit canyon. Each hoofbeat thumped like a drum in his chest, closer, relentless. She stood beside him, taller than any man in the valley, arms folded, breathing steady. The moon glinted off the silver of her hair, casting streaks of light across her face. Her eyes weren't afraid. They were calculating, alive with the fire of a past Elias could only glimpse. "They'll come for me first," she murmured, voice low, almost a chant. You stay behind." Elias shook his head. "I've faced them once before. Don't you think I know what I'm doing?" Her laugh was soft, almost sad, carrying the weight of battles fought long before she arrived in this desert. "You've got skill," she said, "but it won't be enough if I don't help. You think I've never fought before?" The first rider appeared, cresting the ridge like a shadow, sliding over sand. The whinny of his horse carried over the wind. She stepped forward, shifting her stance, every muscle poised like coiled steel. Elias caught the faint glint of her tattoo under moonlight. Lines of a warrior's mark, a legacy written on skin. The rider raised his weapon. The desert held its breath. The horse shifted, restless. Sand lifted around their hooves, curling into temporary storms that mirrored the tension in Elias's chest. She inhaled, slow, deep, a quiet power radiating from her frame. And then, with movement faster than his eye could follow, she struck. One hand grabbed the rider's reins, twisting them with the force of a mountain breaking free. The horse stumbled, rider crashing into the dirt, teeth gritting in surprise and fear. Elias barely had time to blink before the next rider appeared. "Stay close," she commanded, voice calm, unshakable. Each figure that emerged from the darkness met the same fate, stopped, disarmed, overpowered. Yet her movements weren't wild. They were precise, disciplined, a language of violence honed by years he could not imagine. Elias watched, realizing he was witnessing not just strength, but artistry, a legacy of survival and vengeance. A whisper of wind carried the leader's challenge, a shout that tore across the canyon. The bride's gaze hardened, and her jaw clenched. Elias felt a pang of awe, tinged with fear. This woman, this giant figure who had arrived in a crate, was not fragile, not scared. She was the storm, and he was standing in the eye. "You were right," Elias said quietly, almost to himself. "You've fought before." She turned her eyes on him, silver and sharp. "And I'll fight again," she said, muscles coiled ready. "But I fight for the right cause now." And in the shadowed barn, the desert holding its breath, the first sparks of legend began to flare. Elias and the bride, two souls bound by chance and courage, waiting for dawn to test the measure of their strength. The canyon roared with hoofbeats, sand and dust whipping like fire across the dawnlit ground. Elias's heart pounded against his ribs as the leader of the Iron Riders stepped forward, whip coiled in hand, eyes glinting with cruelty. Behind him, the rest of the gang spread wide, a wall of dark shapes cutting across the morning haze. She stepped into the open, towering and unmoving, the desert wind tangling her silver hair around her face. Elias saw the calm in her eyes, the same calm that had leveled the first wave of riders the night before, but now it burned hotter, like a forge ready to ignite. The leader cracked the whip. "Hand her over, Crowther," he shouted, "or die where you stand." She didn't flinch. She moved. The first rider lunged with a sword, but she met him mid-stride, grasping the blade with one hand and twisting, using his own momentum to hurl him into the sand. The horse stumbled, neighing in panic. Another rider swung a club. She caught it, bending it like it was twine, and sent the rider sprawling. Elias's hands tightened around his gun. He had sworn never to pull the trigger again, but seeing her, seeing what they were trying to take from her, he could no longer honor that vow. His eyes scanned, calculating. When the leader drew a pistol, Elias's fingers found the trigger instinctively, the recoil echoing like thunder across the canyon. Sand exploded around him, screams and shouts blending with the rattle of guns and the pounding of hooves. Yet in the middle of it all, she moved like a storm incarnate, unstoppable, her strength precise, controlled, devastating. She disarmed two riders in a single motion, kicking the third from his saddle with a force that sent him sliding across the rock-strewn floor. And then, the twist revealed itself. Elias felt a familiarity in his own movements, a memory of cold steel and deadly precision. "I was a gunfighter once," he muttered, almost to himself. The realization hit him as he ducked another swing. He could still do this. Together, they became a blur of motion. Her brute force and skill, his aim and speed, a lethal partnership born of desperation and trust. By the time the sun fully climbed above the canyon rim, the Iron Riders lay defeated, some fleeing into the dust, others sprawled in surrender. The leader crawled to his knees, eyes wide, unable to comprehend how a mail-order bride and a quiet rancher had dismantled his gang. She lowered her arms, breathing steady, massive frame unshaken. Elias stepped beside her, hands trembling, voice low. "You are unbelievable." She shook her head once, almost shyly. "I'm not property," she said. "I fight for what's right." Elias smiled faintly, the weight of the past lifting, at least for now. "No, but you're welcome here." The wind swept the canyon clean, carrying the echoes of battle, the smell of sand and gunpowder. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk's cry cut across the sky. The desert went quiet again, as if holding its breath, waiting. And the old storyteller would later say, long after both had vanished into legend, some say she rebuilt her tribe, others say they rode into the northern winds. But me? I say legends don't die. They just wait for someone brave enough to tell the tale.